Sorry about that. Missed the button to switch off the music. Hi, welcome to the Sunday edition of Proud Malcontent. I'm Pete Bell, and I am a proud malcontent. It's Sunday, the 26th of October already. And what have we got today? Oh yeah, clocks went back today. Moment of panic this morning when I was getting things prepared, and I glanced at my watch, and it said 9:25. If I'd got the adrenaline going, it turned out my watch had lost contact with my phone. It's linked to my phone, obviously, and so it hadn't updated. But I did enjoy that wee adrenaline rush. I don't know if my heart will take it much more. What have we got today? I'm going to do three quick items, and then from the news, from the National, and the Sunday National, sorry, and then we'll be joined by Stephen uh, Duncan, sorry, Stephen Duncan, a resident number cruncher, who will be talking today about Reform UK and Nigel Farage. So that'll be interesting. What items do I have for you today from the Sunday National? Well, one of the things that I always read, one of the in the Sunday National, is Andrew Tickle's column, and Andrew's really good at explaining legal issues, making them understandable. Legal issues can sometimes be a bit dry and a bit arcane. Andrew manages to make them not just understandable but interesting. And it's quite a disturbing one. This is about the Shekubayo inquiry. Now, it's 10 years. It's more than 10 years. May 2015, I think it was. May 2015. Shekubayo died in police custody in Kirkcaldy, and this is the news that the inquiry is on the verge of collapse because Lord Brackadale, who has been the chair, has resigned. He has been chairing this inquiry, and he has resigned after what appears to be pressure from certain bodies that might be regarded as vested interests, such as Police Federation and the Procurator Fiscal Service, and the establishment, the legal and police establishment in Scotland. And with Lord Brackadale going, the inquiry has finished its evidence-taking phase. It is possible for the Scottish Government to simply appoint another chair, but that whoever it was is going to have to pick up right towards the end, and they're going to have to absorb a lot of information. Severe complications putting a new chair in place. It's not as easy as it sounds. Andrew Tickle explains it a lot better than I do, so I recommend that you go and read his column in the Sunday National. And the second item that I've chosen is an article about the AI data centre plans for Edinburgh. 2 AI centres are either being planned or are being talked about for Edinburgh, and it's the environmental impact of these. Strangely, I couldn't believe this when I read it. They've been excused by Edinburgh City Council. They've been excused a environmental impact survey. They have not had to submit an environmental impact survey other than the part of the way it is included in the planning application. In the case of one of them, the other one doesn't have a planning application in yet. So that seems inadequate to me. But the amount of energy that these data centers consume is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And this could be, I mean, this could be good for Scotland because we produce a lot of electricity, more electricity than we need, and we have a lot of water. That's another thing. So we have more or less ideal conditions for these sort of things, but there is an environmental impact, and that should be looked at more closely. I also wonder myself about what priority is given to these. The energy mostly goes into keeping the places cool, keeping the machinery cool. You can imagine a computer the size of an office building. You know how warm your laptop can get, or your desktop tower. Well, you imagine an entire office building or factory that is like just one big solid computer, and imagine the amount of heat that generates. Some of the suggestions in the comments are quite interesting. That this is there was one aspect that right. I don't know what that is. I was wanting to look at the comments, but I don't seem to be linking to the comments there at all. But one of the concerns is the environmental impact, of course, and another concern is the priority that is given to these things because they absolutely require the cooling. This is. Excuse me a moment. It's because they actually require the cooling. It's essential, or otherwise the whole thing just shuts down. Because they actually require this cooling, they are bound to be given priority where there are electricity cuts, where there are power cuts. They've got to be given priority. So that's a concern, and there were a couple of other things in the comments that I found interesting, but I'm not finding the comments. I really wanted to speak about this too, and here we go. Right. There's one thing that's been suggested is that this heat should be used for district heating, which I think is just the natural thing to do with it. And the other thing concerned is that the power and the water that they use as well. There have been a couple of reports on this, and the idea is that it's stuff that is needed for billionaires. It's the high-tech companies, the big tech companies that need these AI data centers, and it's this comment said, and the rest of us pay for it in the long term. Well, yeah, I would dispute that. I would disagree with that because I have only recently started using AI, and I find it absolutely brilliant. It is massively useful. It can do basic research for you in moments. Research that previously would have taken me half a day or more. I can now do in moments using AI. I simply have to, it's just a matter of asking the right question, just like as with using a search engine. The only skill required is knowing what is the right question to ask. Likewise with AI, you ask the right question, and you can get your research done in seconds. Also, in summarizing articles, you can summarize articles very quickly and pick out the salient points from them. I don't like that as a substitute for actually reading the article, but the summary provided by AI can be very useful when you're commenting on it, because it can highlight these salient points so that you are sure that you're addressing them all. Uh, so, uh, and I'm just an ordinary person, so I find it useful. Obviously, the big tech companies are the main users, are going to be the main users of this, and there are concerns too about how all this aggregated information about everybody is going to be used, because basically these AI centers have access to all the information in the world potentially. There are bits, obviously, security and defence related bits that are supposedly fenced off. I'm not so sure. Don't have that much confidence in them, but they have access, and this is why they're so good at research. They have access to all the information in the world. It's like a giant Wikipedia. It's like Wikipedia on steroids, as the saying goes. So the potential there is kind of frightening because it's huge. And one of the things that I see in comments is that this technology should be stopped, that we should put a halt to it. And I'm sorry, folks, but that just is not possible. Once that gets rolling, there's no stopping it. There's no legislation that can stop it. And if you try to stop it, well, it's just not going to work. It's not just going to work. It's just not, we live in a society which is technology dependent. And as an individual, you can go off grid. You can step outside this technology dependent society. But for most of us, that is not an option. And for even more of us, it's not a lifetime option. It's very difficult to step outside. Take a bank account, for example. It's very difficult for any of us to manage our affairs without a bank account. So you can say, well, you're not obliged to have a bank account, but it's very difficult to function without one. So it'll get to be the same with AI. It'll get to the point where we find it very difficult to function without it. And a comment here from Dave McGowran saying we'd be like the Amish if we did that. True enough, Dave. But yeah, the Amish have had centuries of getting accustomed to this. They've got it all worked out. I don't know that I could transition into an Amish lifestyle not very easily anyway. Apart from anything else, there'd be a lot of hard work involved. I'm a lazy bastard, so no, it's not for me, Dave. Not for me. Right, let's go on to the final item before we go over to Stephen Duncan. And entirely coincidentally, it's about, if I could just get this damn software to work, supposed to be switching over to the these other screen. Let's try that. There we go. That's working now. Sorry, Nigel Farage, and this is about the headline says all Nigel Farage slammed for 25 working days spent recording Cameo videos. Now, Cameo is a website. Hopefully, I can show you here. This is Nigel Farage's page on Cameo. It's a site where you can ask celebrities to record special messages for you, birthday messages or whatever. Celebrities, it's for celebrities. And you pay for these things. To book a personal video from Nigel Farage will cost you £71.37 plus. So presumably that's plus tax, plus VAT. That's not cheap, you know. I mean, you could buy a birthday card for considerably less than that. And a birthday card would be more enjoyable, I think. I can't imagine anybody actually wanting to buy a recording of Nigel Farage saying something banal about birthday. I just can't imagine it. But it's this whole thing about celebrity. These are his fans. That's what they call them, fans. Politicians having fans, it does not compute, but it does seem very much in line with the way politics is going, or the changes in politics. And perhaps some of that will come out in the following discussion, where we're joined by Stephen Duncan. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, Peter.
That's better. You look like you were about to slip off the bottom of the screen. And how are you today?
Very well, thank you. Very good. Yes, a bit cooler today.
Yeah, the last couple of shows I've been moved to remark on what a brilliant sunny day it was here in Perth. Not today. Today is more like you would expect October to be. Now there was something we were talking about before we came on here. We have a little, Stephen and I have a little confab prior to the show, really just checking to make sure everything's working, including myself. So we were talking about saying, Stephen mentioned something. He sent me an email about it. Stephen, perhaps you'd like to tell the audience what the hell I'm talking about.
Well, it's really to do with just something I picked up first thing this morning, was the Irish presidential election, the results of it. The counting finished last night, and the main story that's come out of it is the amount of spoiled ballot papers that were registered. I calculated it was 12.9%. Normally, that's 1%. Huge. That's the real story of and that's all the Irish press are reporting on this morning, is that the fact that people just seem to be rejecting the process and the candidates is not representing them.
Sorry, Stephen, this was an organised campaign.
It was online campaign, seemingly. I don't know what the body was, but it's certainly that's the body was that was organising it. But that was the discussion that and that's been accepted, and that was a discussion between the interviewers and the politicians being interviewed. It was just accepted that was an organised campaign where people said, if you don't want to, or if you don't wish to, these candidates, you don't think these candidates represent you, then spoil your ballot paper and tell them why you're spoiling it. And a lot of people went to a lot of trouble to do that. And indeed, some of them have written letters and enclosed them in their ballot papers when they put them in the boxes before they were counted. So quite something for us to think about, maybe for with Holyrood coming up next year.
I'm a wee bit dubious about enclosing a letter with your ballot. I suspect that might void your ballot. It might. I'm not sure on that. However, I find this very interesting for the very obvious reason that I tried to get a similar campaign going for the 2024 UK general election. Where I tried to get people writing "End the Union" across their ballot paper, and I think quite a lot of people did. Raw numbers, but hundreds, maybe a few thousand. I honestly don't know that. It was not significant enough. It didn't work well enough for it to make an impact. But a lot of people expressed doubts about whether such a campaign ever could make an impact. And the Irish seem to have proved that it can. Going from 1% to almost 13%, that's huge.
Yeah. Well, it's never been more than 1%, and going all the way back to 1990, I checked. In all the presidential elections, been about 6 of them, I think, since the institution or the head of state was set up in that way. So yeah, quite very significant. I think the most we've ever had in a Scottish election was the 2007 one, which came about by accident. Because there was 3 different ballot papers around that on the 2007 election. There was the 2 constituency in the region and the council elections all happened at the same time, and there was like 3%, I think, on the constituency were spoiled, and 4% on the region, or the other way around. Nothing like 13%, but still enough to make the story that night as well.
The explanation for 2007, of course, is that it was Dougie Alexander, was it not, that was in charge of it, our new Governor General. Dougie Alexander was in charge of organising the voting, and basically he just made a total arse of it. Yeah, that's interesting. I think you've sent me some details on this, and I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. But I will do, and we'll perhaps go into this more on Wednesday. But one of the things that I find interesting here is the fact that when I was trying to organise this, a coordinated campaign, End the Union campaign for the 2024 UK general election, I always made the point that this was only for a UK general election. I talked about repurposing a ballot, and that it only applied to UK general elections. But the situation here in Scotland now is such that for next year's election, I think an organised campaign of ballot repurposing has potential, because we just look at the options. Dave McGowan on this. Dave McGowan is saying to us that a voting SNP on the second ballot is the equivalent of an organised vote spoiling. Well, no, it isn't, Dave, because it's not serving a purpose outside the organised voting system, the established voting system. The point of the Irish campaign was to do something that was outside, and the same with the End the Union campaign. A vote for the SNP is a vote for the SNP, is a vote for, well, the most established parties. So it's working within the established system. And it does send a message. It sends the very message that the SNP wants, because they want those votes. They, to a large extent, they're not fussed who wins the seats, who gets the list seats. They're not fussed. They just want those votes. They're going to win on the constituency. They're going to get enough constituency seats to remain the dominant party. They also want those votes on the list, just so that they can show them off. They say, look, we also got 39% of the list votes or whatever. So it's that's working within the system. But it equates to letting the unionists in. Dave says this is getting to be a discussion with Dave Gowran. Well, not really. You know, what lets unionists in, Dave, is people voting for them. So the first problem is that people are voting for them. The second problem is that they're British parties and they're in our parliament. They are squatting in our parliament. So just fiddling with the voting system just isn't going to work. However, we have another guest on the show, apart from Dave McGowran, and his name, if you remember, is Stephen Duncan. Yes, I had to grope for it myself. His name is Stephen Duncan, and he's going to be talking today about Nigel Farage and Reform UK. So let's let him get on with it, shall we? I'll get back to you later, Dave.
Nope, that's the end of it. So start at the beginning. Yes, as you say, Peter, we're looking at Reform UK in Scotland and how they're doing here and what's likely to happen next year.
Excuse me, Stephen, but we seem to have lost the presentation. It seems to be loading. This is maybe just on my screen. Are you seeing the presentation?
I can see it. Yeah.
Yep. Then hopefully everybody else can, and this is just my problem. I'll let you get on with it. It's slightly difficult for me because I can't actually see it. But I'll let you get on, Stephen.
Okay, I'll move on to page 2. Can you see that, Peter?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Try going back to page 1 now. There we go. There we go.
Good. All right, we're back in sync. Okay, so I'm going to look at what's happening with reform in the UK, in Scotland, and what's the voting patterns and likely intention as we now stand for people voting for them in Holyrood election in 2026. So moving on to slide 2 now, a few charts there. First thing I would say that in terms of reform, I've had a little bit look at the historical lineage of that party, and they actually started out as the Anti-Federalist League back in 1991, led by and founded by a guy called Alan Sked. They then morphed into UKIP a couple of years later, and Farage took over the leadership in 1997. So Farage came and went as the leader on a number of occasions, standing down, getting re-elected, and then when after the Brexit or the EU withdrawal act or vote took place, Farage stood down for a final time and then set up the Brexit Party in 2018 to make sure that Brexit happened during that sort of 3-year sort of period where there was a big discussion as to whether Brexit would actually occur during the Theresa May premiership. Thereafter, the UKIP sort of carried on as a sort of a rump UKIP, and then the Brexit Party became the Reform Party in, I think it was January 2021, after Brexit had occurred. So that's the sort of the background. So they've been around a long time, one guise or another. And just go back to this chart now, or this slide. The two charts on the left-hand side are the European elections from 2009 to 2019. So if we just go through that, the bottom chart looks at the vote percentages for the various parties, 2009, 2014, 2019. And you can see in 2009, the vote for UKIP, that's the purple bar, was 5%. That increased significantly to doubled to 11% in 2014 in Scotland, that is. And that's when David Coburn of UKIP got elected as an MEP, the first time that there was a breakthrough of some sort in Scotland for the party. The time 2019 came around, just before Brexit actually happened in January of 2020, that vote increased to 15% for the now Brexit Party led by Farage, and again they got an MEP elected. I can't remember the name of the person. It wasn't Coburn. I think he'd fallen out of favour by that time. And you can see also there's a little bit of the rump UKIP party, 2% in 2019. So in total, between the two parties, it was 17%. So perhaps we shouldn't be too surprised at where we are now, because they've been around quite a long time. The vote has been it's sizable, and it's been growing, still growing, and they've had parliamentary representation in Scotland, albeit in the European or Strasbourg Parliament. So that's the sort of backdrop. Moving on to where we are now, on the right-hand side of that slide, there's again a few bar charts.
Just sorry, Stephen, before you go on to that, a comment. This was back a few minutes ago, but I thought it would be best to bring it up now. It's Dave McGowran again, and he's saying polls show his mob, Farage's mob, are getting into Holyrood. Only if we vote SNP on the second vote, though. We have the power, but can we use it properly? The consequences will be serious if we don't. That seemed to me to be a salient point. The point about only if we vote SNP on the second ballot. Perhaps you'd like to comment on that. Does that sound right to you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Dave's probably sort of talking about the sort of supermajority approach that we've discussed in the past, sort of splitting a vote between, one pro-independence party in the constituency, probably SNP, and then another one, a different one, whether it's the Greens or Alpa or somebody else on the second ballot. So this not wasting your vote as it's been characterised as being.
I think what Dave's talking about here more is this idea that by voting SNP on the regional ballot, you are letting someone else in. You're letting the unionists in. Or Dave's point is that you're letting Reform UK in. You're letting Farage in by voting SNP. On the face of it, that sounds to me like a bit of scaremongering. Not that I'm suggesting that that's what David intended, but it sounds like that kind of thing to me. I'm just wondering how much truth there is in this, how much reality there is in this, that you're letting Reform in by voting SNP on the regional ballot.
Well, I mean, if the Reform are getting, was it 20% or there? But I don't know. Depending which poll you look at, and we'll look at them a bit later. But 18 to 20% of the vote on the region, then you're going to get representation for Reform there, as you should do, because that's what the Parliament's designed to do. It's meant to reflect the proportion of votes that occur in the country. It's meant to correct for the bias of the of the constituency vote, which is like a Westminster election. So it's doing what it's meant to do. So it's not, you're not letting unionists in by default. It's you're getting, people are voting for reform at that level because they want to see that representation in the Parliament, rightly or wrongly.
This is precisely my point. The proportionality is what is important about this.
Exactly.
And the Electoral Reform Society looked at this way back, I think, I can't remember when, but quite a long time ago. They looked at it. Well, the voting system hasn't changed since then, so it's still valid. They found that it did produce proportionality. And that is important. And a lot of people seem to want to break this proportionality. But what I think you're saying here, Stephen, is that if Reform UK get anything above 8% in the regional ballot, they are going to take seats, or they're likely to take seats, regardless of how everybody votes, whether you vote SNP on your second ballot or some other nominally pro-independence party. It's the vote for Reform UK that gets them the seats, not the way other people are voting.
Well, they're linked. They're linked, really. It depends how the vote breaks down. I think if you got a big concentration of votes in any one party, so you got 20%, let's say, for Reform, but you got a big concentration for votes in, for another party on the list, then they will take seats away from Reform. But if the vote is spread across all the other parties, then they won't do quite so. They won't do. They're not such a threat to Reform, if I can put it that way.
Right.
Reform are likely to take more votes. It depends on two things. It depends on the bulk of votes that the Reform get, and it depends on the spread of the votes, how they're spread across all the competitor parties. It's a combination. There's so many different combinations can create so many different results. It's really quite difficult to play the system. I think we discussed that before.
Yeah.
It depends on people voting in bulk for one party. If another pro-independence party were to stand and were to take a lot of the SNP votes from the list, then they would get seats, and probably at the expense of what's being projected for Reform at the moment.
My point really was that what people are campaigning for is SNP 1 and any other nominally pro-independence party on the regional ballot, and that my point is that if it's spread in that way, if people are voting for different nominally pro-independence parties, then Reform's vote is going to carry them through. So that would seem to suggest that if it's a concentration on one nominally pro-independence party, voting SNP is actually a good way of stopping Reform UK, because whatever seats the SNP does take on the list, they'll be taking them from Reform. Is that right?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily from Reform.
Isn't that always?
And you'd have to get a lot of votes with the SNP. You'd have to get an awful lot of votes for the SNP, probably 50% on the list, to start competing for these seats, because they're doing so well in the constituency, because their votes are going to be diluted so much that the second vote for the SNP is going to be diluted so much. It's going to take an awful lot of votes on the list. So that to offset that dilution effect.
Stephen, I'm going to draw a line under this. We'll have another comment from Russell Bruce, and it also is about the both votes SNP and SNPA, another thing. Sorry, Russell, but I actually don't want to get into that discussion here. That's not what we're discussing today. I know it's related, but I think we better let Stephen get on with what he wants to talk about. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So let's carry on with it. So just on, I'll crack on quickly now with this. I think these bar charts on the are showing and really just designed to highlight how significant reform is on both the region and on the constituency. So there are two polls there, one from Find Out Now at the top and one from Norstat at the bottom. These are the ones that were conducted in September. There's been some more out since then. So reform, quite significant, somewhere between 16 and 20% of the vote, the second largest after the SNP. I've got a little table just down below that, which shows a sort of a mapping to the likely number of seats based on the results from various opinion polls. There was an opinion poll out on Friday night from Find Out Now, and that's the most recent one. It's in that table at the top. And there was one out last night as well, which is too late to include in that table. But I've done a quick calculation. It looks roughly from these opinion polls there, these 5 opinion polls in that little table at the bottom, plus the one that came out overnight. From Survation, it's looking like roughly 18 to 19 seats for reform next year, as things stand, as an average across all these polls. It was 17 to 18. It's sort of gone up a little bit because of last night's polls, so that's how it's looking.
Is there in the indication there of who Reform are taking these seats from? I'll just mention that we have spoken before about how the involvement of Reform UK this time puts up the price of seats. As the analogy that you used, they're increasing demand for these list seats because they're now another party. That's more parties looking for seats, increasing demand, the price goes up accordingly. We talked about that before, but that's a point worth making at the moment, I think. But what I was wondering is if there's an indication of where these seats for Reform are coming from. Are they coming mainly from any one party?
Okay, well, the details on that are not out yet because it just came out overnight. So I've just got the headline numbers, plugged them into the system I have for calculating. I calculate it two different ways, so I take an average between the two. I've showed this sort of as an additive method and a sort of relative method I've used there. It doesn't. I can't tell exactly who they're coming from, but I can tell you they're not coming from the SNP because the SNP were only looking like they're going to be taking at best 1 or 2 seats on the list anyway, as things stood. And according to the plugging these numbers in, it looks like they're still going to get 1 seat if there's a sort of uniform swing across all the different regions. So they'll be coming from the other unionist parties,
right?
Essentially, okay. So basically, it's a cannibalization of the unionist seats by Reform, if you like.
Yeah,
but I should say that even
that's a good word. I like that term.
No, I didn't catch that.
Cannibalization. I like that term. It's very descriptive of what's happening. I think I shall probably use that.
Okay, this sounds not so good, I'm afraid.
We had a little bit. We're getting a little bit of judder on your video. And just a little bit of breakup, but I'm sure all our viewers are quite accustomed to that. That's one of the things that we live with, all this brilliant tech, and I've actually sort of tongue-in-cheek estimated that at any given time there's about 25% of the World Wide Web that isn't working at all. So, and 25% of the stuff across the board just doesn't work. So, if somebody wants to argue with that figure, I'd be quite happy to hear their calculations on that. For the moment, it's your calculations that are of interest to us, Stephen.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. Right, just a few demographics now from the Find Out Now poll from last month. So the top 3 charts are constituency related, and the bottom 3 charts are charts relate to the region. So on the left-hand side, the black and the salmon pink bars, they relate to the split between male and female. And you can see with regard to all the parties, with the exception of the Scottish Greens, that is predominantly, male supported. Only the Greens have a preponderance of female supporters. The last, if you look at the second to the right, second most right, on both of these charts, that you see Reform, it's roughly, I think it's about just over 60%, 64%, 65% male. And that compares to 60% Tory. And in fact, for Alpa, it's about 67, 70%. So it's not an extreme either way you look at it. So Reform pretty much in line with, on the sort of sex-based split, pretty much in line with all the other parties, roughly 2-to-1 male-female. If we move into the middle charts, we look at the age breakdown. Again, the second most right clump of bars there. We look at the age. We're looking at the age profile now, and it's the youngest on the left-hand side and the oldest on the right-hand side of these clump. You can see that Reform's fairly evenly spread. It's really just the exception of the 30-somethings where they have got a lower amount of support, and they're in this respect, they're like the SNP. It's very, broadly based in terms of age profile. The difference with the SNP is that their minority support comes from 75 and older. For Reform, it's the 30-somethings. So again, quite broadly based. It's not any one particular age group that they are relying on for the support. On the right-hand side, you've got the voting, support for the parties from those who voted at Westminster last year. And this is quite significant. These green bars in both charts show the proportion of votes coming from those people those non-voters in 2024. They were just either ineligible because they were too young, they weren't of voting age, or more likely they were abstainers. The disillusioned, disappointed, despondent, perhaps. And in both the constituency and the region, Reform are getting their majority of their support from that particular segment of the population, and that's unlike any of the other parties. They're not all getting, there's no other party other than Reform that are getting the majority of support from non-voters in the Westminster election from last year on both ballots.
That is a certain significance, Stephen, because I have maintained that the disenchanted, the disillusioned, that is the one of the main sources that should be targeted for support for independence, support for yes. Yeah. That's where we should be looking to get these extra votes, and not this trying to persuade people who are voting anyway, but trying to get through to these non-voters. And Reform UK seem to have done this very successfully.
It would look like it.
It rather proves that it can have the effect that I suggest. So, I was right again. That's all I want to say.
Okay, move on to the next slide. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the Northstat opinion poll from September, and on again the constituency voting intentions on the top 3, region at the bottom 3. And on the left-hand side, that's sort of salmon pink and green bars. That looks at the yes-no splits, the current yes-no voting intention if there was a referendum tomorrow on Scottish independence. Again, reform second from the right, it's roughly 3-1 in favour of no. That's pretty much in line with what you'd expect, and it's no more dramatic than the Tories. It's about the same as the Tories. It's the same as the Liberal Democrats. A little bit more than Labour. So it's not like 95% in favour of no and 5% in favour of yes. So that's quite interesting. And then if we look at the middle pie chart, I've broken out there's 29% of those people who are in the constituency voting intention who are voting for unionist parties, but are in favour of yes. It's quite a significant number, that, but even more important is the rightmost chart. We look at all these unionist parties that make up that 29% that are in favour of yes. If you break them out into the different parties, you can see that Reform, that light blue chunk, represents 31%. So it's just under a third of unionists. They represent 31% of the pro-independence supporters that support, believe it or not, unionist parties, according to this poll, are going to vote for unionist parties next year. Right. So it's quite a significant amount, that, and it equates roughly to about 8 or 9% of all independent supporters are going to vote for Reform next year.
Well, this is quite surprising and quite difficult to understand. But it seems to knock on the head the idea that if you vote for a unionist party, you're voting against independence, or if you are voting against independence, there's quite a large part of the electorate that doesn't understand that they're voting against independence. It's very difficult to get your head around this.
Well, we've always known that there's a big chunk of Labour vote supporters in Scotland that support independence. We've always known that.
Yeah,
It's the amount there's support from the Tories and from the Liberals as well, or from Tory voters and Liberal voters, seemingly supporters of independence as well. But it's just the biggest one, and a lot bigger than that, is Reform. And that's
the Labour thing is no surprise. It's the support for yes, support for independence is coming from parties that you would think would be the natural home of hardline unionists, and yet apparently not. There's something interesting in there. I'm not quite. I'm reaching for it. There is something interesting in there. But one of the things that it does suggest to me, especially with that chunk of the pro-independence vote that is going to Reform, what it does suggest to me that being the disruptor, which I've suggested is the biggest part of the explanation for Reform's success, and the biggest part of the explanation for them attracting the disillusioned and disenchanted. If you're a successful disruptor, you will attract votes from across the board, and that includes independence supporters. But my suggestion has long been that what we require on the pro-independence side is a party that is as big a disruptor as Reform and as good at it as Nigel Farage. So again, all I want to say is I was right again.
Okay, right, we'll move on to the summing up, just a quick recap on what the conclusion is. 21st century Reformation of Scotland certainly needs to be taken seriously. I would suggest, after looking at these numbers, and given they've been around quite a long time, and we shouldn't be surprised that they're making inroads, because they did get an elected representative here over 11 years ago in the European elections. So and they've got a reasonably broad appeal. It's fairly evenly spread amongst the age groups, a bit like the SNP, very successful party, whether we like them or not. It's predominantly male supported, but so are all the other parties, no surprise. And they seem to be tapping into the non-voting cohort from last year. The disenchanted, the disconnected, the despondent types, and they represent 8 to 9% of independent supporters, which is not much different from British Labour in Scotland, which 10 to 11% based on these numbers. They're up against some political opponents, like, yes, we know the SNP are very strong, but they're vulnerable. They're seen as the establishment party. They've been in government for 20 years, just about. And they do come across as complacent. There's definitely a lot of incompetence around in their policies, and there's a lot of whining and whinging about Westminster, but they're not actually doing anything about it. They're very timorous in their approach, as we've discussed for years now, and we saw what happened in the conference last weekend. Many people seen that as a betrayal of the party and its principles. The Alba Party seems to be going nowhere, especially since the death of Alex Salmond. Lots of feuding and expulsions. They now don't have any elected representatives, with Ash Regan stepping down from the party, becoming an independent. And their approach on Scotland's cause is pretty much the same as the SNP's. Very conservative and very much playing by British rules. The Unionist parties, meanwhile, are in disarray. The British Labour, with all its U-turns, tax on civil liberties, really unpopular. The Conservatives have never really recovered from, Margaret Thatcher, in Scotland at least, the austerity since 2010, and probably the corruption that we've seen over the pandemic. And also, there's just a general loss of belief in the democratic process. Now, I'm saying there's reduced electoral turnouts there. In fact, in Scotland, they've held up in the Scottish Parliament elections, but last year in the Westminster election, it fell below 60% for the first time for quite some time, since about 2001, I think. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, next year on that. So that's really pretty much all I've got to say on reform for the time being, Peter.
Well, it's a lot to digest, Stephen. There's a lot of stuff in there, and I suspect if people are taking this seriously and really looking at it and thinking about what it is that you've said and what your charts show, that it will change people's view of reform, I suspect. Not necessarily convert them to Nigel Farage forms. I can't see them requesting cameos from Nigel Farage, but it will just change the way they see where reform fits in the whole electoral process. One comment here. There's a couple of commenters. Russell Bruce mentioned earlier, and the very interestingly named Rhodesian Mpenzi William. They seem to be having a wee argument between themselves on the comments, so we'll just leave them to it. Thank you, gentlemen. But there's a comment here from Dave McGowran again. Hi, Dave. Good to have you back. And it's a slightly cryptic: ethnic nationalism with 2 question marks. I suspect what Dave's struggling to say here is that perhaps the pro-independence part of the Reform UK vote is from this ethnic nationalism. I kind of see where he's coming from there, but I don't think there's really anything to suggest that it's the people in the pro-independence movement. There are people who tend somewhat towards the ethnic nationalism side of things. It's a factor in all nationalist movements. But to suggest, Dave's confirmed that is what he meant. To suggest that the ethnic nationalist tendency of the pro-independence vote has shifted to reform, I don't really see that there would be any reason for them to do that.
Need more questions, I think, and more research to be done on that. I've not seen anything on that, but
no, I'm not sure what they would see in reform at all. In fact, I don't think there's none of the nominally pro-independence parties that tend towards ethnic nationalism. But most of them try to keep well away from it, and it does put certain limits on the discussion. However, Stephen, we have managed, mainly thanks to the interventions from Mr. McGowran, we've managed to run over our time today. Now, I've always said that if we were involved in an interesting discussion, if there was stuff going on, that I had no problems at all with running over time. And that has been the case today. It's all been very interesting, and I'd like to thank you very much, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Bye for now.
Bye.
And it's getting round to about time I was saying goodbye as well. As I say, I'll be back with you on Wednesday, when I strongly suspect I'll be taking a closer look at the Irish presidential election and the implications that might have for a repurpose your ballot effort in the 2026 Scottish general election. That may be it, or it might be something else entirely. You'll have to tune in on Wednesday to find out. For now, goodbye.